welcome to Xena Warrior Podcast. My name is Vera, and I'm joined, as always, by my two alluring co-hosts, Katie.
Hello.
And Livy.
Hi.
We have a special episode today. It's a Patreon-funded episode.
Yes. And sponsored. I'm sure they'd like to sponsor it for us.
Sponsored by Patreon. And Liv, why don't you explain what's going on?
So, about 84 years ago...
It's been 84 years.
We put up a poll exclusive to our patrons on Patreon where they could choose the topic of our next minisode, which we assumed we would record in like... a week.
84 years ago.
This topic was the winner of that poll, I believe, by a fairly significant amount.
I got it right here. Shall we?
Yeah,
do you want to do?
Let's hear the
Well,
percentage.
the three topics were queerbaiting and why Xena isn't, Battle of the Lukes, and a deep dive into melodrama as a genre. So thanks for picking the hardest one, everybody.
I think melodrama would have been pretty hard as well.
Yeah.
I think Battle of the Lukes as well.
Battle of the Lukes would have required all of our talents.
Great detail. That's
Yeah.
how we were forced to describe Lukes.
But no, Queerbaiting and Why Xena Isn't was the winner of that poll. So that is going to be what we're talking about today.
Hooray.
I think it was like fortuitous somehow because we ended up recording it on the weekend of Klexicon.
It is.
Wow, that's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Are you revealing to
We
everyone
are
how behind
definitely
we are
revealing
on
that.
recording?
But it's cool. It's a cool reveal, you know? All right, well, why don't we begin with the definition of queerbaiting?
Oh, we just jump right in.
Is there
Jump right
anything
in.
else?
Actually, even before we do that, I'd like to remind people why this was a topic that kind of ended up on that list, which is that we had seen posts on Tumblr from fans saying that Xena was queerbaiting, and we were upset to see that because we don't believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
So this discussion is going to be us trying to make that case for you.
I don't think
this...
something tells me we're preaching to a choir, but it's okay.
Which is how we like it.
All right, well, okay, now you can do the definition.
Okay, guys, what is queerbaiting?
It's debate. I feel like the definition, depending on who you talk to, can be a little nebulous.
And it's fairly new, right?
Yeah, it's fairly new. I was looking for some kind of first usage and couldn't really find it. I saw people referring to it being coined on Tumblr, which I think makes sense because Tumblr is still the go-to place where fandom has lived since about, like the mid-2000s?
Really? Is that when Tumblr
Late
started?
2000s, maybe?
Early 2000s.
I mean, the aughts.
Yeah.
The aughts.
Yeah.
The future of 2000.
Oh, no, yeah, 2000, you know what I mean, decades. But what I'm saying is that in the last 10 years, this term has come to be used. It's very new, even if you want to look at the history of fandom. It certainly didn't exist at the time that Xena was airing. So that's something to think about as we have this discussion.
When Xena was airing, the internet was like a baby internet.
Oh,
Sweet
cute little baby internet.
internet.
And of course, we're going to get into the fact that queerbaiting doesn't just describe the use of queer subtext in a show. It's also about the relationship between the creator of that show and the audience.
For me, that is the overriding factor in queerbaiting at this point in time. But we should go through what's the definitions you got there?
Okay, I have a definition from Pink News. They say queerbaiting is a term which refers to authors, writers, or showrunners attempting to attract an LGBT audience by hinting at same-sex relationships between characters, though they never actually consummate. That's a simple one. Three Patch Podcast, which is a Sherlock podcast, had a special episode on queerbaiting.
Oh, highly recommend it.
Highly recommend it. It doesn't really talk about femslash at
all.
all.
0%.
But it's a very smart conversation with a bunch of very highly educated
If you want to
academics.
hear smart discussion about it,
Yeah, as opposed to
check out the
these
Sherlock
three
podcast.
nonsenses. But no mention of ladies, so we're going to one-up them today.
Yeah.
Here's how they define queerbaiting. It's producing content with queer coding that queer fans or fans interested in queer stories will read as cues to infer queer relationships or queer identities in characters, but never having those relationships or identities actualized in the text in a way that would be recognizable to mainstream audiences. I think that's an important
All right,
part of
they're
that.
just friends.
Baiting by attracting these audiences, but not fulfilling their interests or reflecting their experiences in the media itself.
Yeah, this one went deeper.
A little deeper, and I think very specific there in the way that it explains that actualizing is something really specific, which is like the mainstream must recognize it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. So that's it. That's the two definitions
Those are
we got.
the two I found.
We
Those
can
are
work with
good.
this.
Is there anything you feel that has been left out by those definitions?
I don't know. I feel like that will come up as we go along. But no, I think those are good baselines for what it is and how it's understood. Especially that second one, I'm a little more partial to than the first one. And I think that you can see, based on how people think about this term and this concept, like how you can go and say that about Xena.
Yeah.
If you don't do just a minimal effort of thinking.
Oh, I see.
And, you know, watching the show helps.
Yeah.
I do feel like a lot of times when Xena will pop up in articles about queerbaiting where you can clearly tell that people haven't watched it.
That's
You know what I mean?
interesting.
Or maybe don't
Yeah,
remember,
or
exactly
don't
what it
remember,
actually is.
Like
and how
what was
it
going on.
is.
Because you just know, oh, this was the big subtext ship. And so therefore it must be, because it was never canon. And the producers, and people would say that, like, you know, they would tease people or something like that. Like, this has come up. Like, I don't want to, like, shout out the names of places that I didn't like.
That's fair enough. We don't want to bring
but,
them
you know,
audience.
I did actually see there was one article that was like, and it was very recent because it included like the last couple years of some movies and stuff, and it basically called it the worst offender of all, and perhaps the most well-known example of queerbaiting in history.
Oh my god.
And I was just like so mad at that because like it just very clearly just seems like someone who doesn't know what they're talking about or just like has a like offhand knowledge of like this ship.
I mean, that just makes me so angry because we're going to get into it. There are so many terrible examples of really awful queerbaiting.
Yeah.
Like ugly situations between creators and fans. And I think to me that's such an important aspect of the definition. It's not just what the show is doing. It is the way that those people are reacting to their fan base when their fan base says, like, we see this and we love this. Mm-hmm. And I just don't see that for Xena. And I mean, we'll get into it. Xena, to me, seems really supportive and more than supportive, like celebrating those fans. And I think you see that celebration in the show if you watch it with any degree of concentration. Like, yeah, I totally see how, you know, in the current cultural moment that we live in, you think about Xena and you go, well, yeah, they, you know, they were never like, we're girlfriends, we're gay, so it's queerbaiting.
Right.
But that's just such a simplistic way of looking at the issue.
And it's one of our big, like, things that, you know, I feel like we argue a lot is that, like, it is very much canon and that there is kind of this idea of the whole text just being a queer text where, and you can obviously do your readings, which is a important aspect of this, but, like, it's just hard for me to, like, get to the end of this show and, you know, have Xena be like, this is my soulmate, Gabrielle, and, like, and, like, not have it. I'm like, what show are people watching?
I mean, it's
that
true.
I'm not watching.
Like, they put as their Facebook status soulmates with, you know, that seems pretty clear to me.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be like, not canon if I saw that as someone's status.
Yeah, so it always is a little shocking to me when that comes up. So I feel like it needs to stop. Let's stop it right now.
Unpacked.
Yeah.
Well,
unpack.
for me, really the number one thing to consider is this idea of showrunner fan relationships. I have a wonderful comic that illustrates this.
Great.
Called Queerbaiting the Comic.
Okay.
By Tumblr user Nikki Ano. The first panel is a girl on her computer. She sees, this is about boy shipping, please forgive, but she sees two boys. She says, awesome, popular show, love it, super close relationship between the two leads, same sex, yay. Then like a panel with lots of hearts. Unwavering loyalty, devotion, saving each other, most important person. You guys would be a great couple, says supporting character number 2. Back to the various fans, thinking to themselves, could they be like me? And they have rainbow hearts on their chests. And then the final panel, which is a giant mouth, like a big angry mouth, saying in all caps, ha ha, how silly, where did you get that idea from? It were just jokes. You're delusional. It's not that kind of show, but we'll have your money. And then little silhouettes of the sad fans going, oh. So I feel like all the way up through the panels, like every panel here is Xena until the end, until that final panel with the giant mouth being like, I'll take your money. You're delusional. Yeah. Like that just to me doesn't reflect what Xena is.
I'm sure they wanted a big audience of money, but the delusional part is absolutely not correct.
It's the judgment. It's the antagonism. It's the like, how dare you see this in my program?
Exactly.
My program.
Yeah, and there's two. I feel like that's indicative for me with the production side aspect of it, where it's like, you know, the like how dare you side, and then there's also the what I almost find is way worse than the we didn't intend this and like why are you doing this, is the what for me is always the worst thing about queerbaiting, which is we know we're doing this and we're doing it on purpose and we know you like this and then we're never going to give you the thing.
Which is so opposite Xena.
Yes.
Like, we know you like it, we're doing it on purpose, but we could give it to you if we only could, if we were not a show in, like, 1995. And the big mouth is the network screaming at us because De Beers won't do our, give us sponsorships for, like, commercials.
Absolutely, yeah. That's important. Who is the big mouth?
Yeah.
Like, for many shows, it's the creators themselves. For Xena, it was the network. Yeah. It was the sponsors. It was the money machine, not the people who wanted to make the show.
Should we go through like other stuff first and then go into like contextualizing Xena and all that?
I think so. It seems important to talk about these ugly relationships because they're just, once you actually read about them, you're like, oh wow, that's not Tappert, that's not Liz Friedman. They would never say these things. Yeah.
So these are all kind of like new, right? So since the internet is no longer a baby, it has progressed to give us wonderful platforms like Twitter.
Oh.
Hooray.
Where anybody can talk to a creator all the time.
Yo, that just made me want to say also that like that wall was just a tumbling when Xena came out. So like really
the fourth wall.
Nobody had any idea how to interact with anybody.
They did though. They don't know. They had the chat rooms, right?
They did, but I mean like nobody. The process now is kind of like established in this sense where like.
Yeah.
They were just beginning to do that on Xena.
Right.
Steve Sears was on message boards talking to people.
Right.
But it was in its infancy, I think Xena was laying the groundwork for some of the things that would happen later. But maybe because Xena was one of the first shows to do this, it's a much more, I think, polite place, even though
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that during the Rift, Steve Sears quit that message board in a huff.
Yeah.
And then he seemed to have had a whole article on Whoosh where he interviews himself.
Oh, right. Yes. We talked about that when we were discussing the Rift. Obviously, when shows do things that displease fans, people are less eager to be accessible to fans.
Yeah.
That's been happening, basically, since the internet existed. But even then, I think it's important that you see that the way Steve reacted to that was to continue to talk to fans, trying to find, he never, like, pulls down the Iron Curtain, being like, no. He's like, how can I do this in a way that, like, people will understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah. I certainly think that, like, Twitter, like you're saying, Vera, like, it's just made everything that much more
I mean, they
malicious.
They have, like, actors have to have it in their contract to live tweet the episodes, and that is an awful experience, I'm sure. Yeah. So, do we have favorite queerbaiting examples?
Favorites. Like, let's see. I mean, there are just so many to choose from. I feel like there are a few examples that I want us to go through just for their, like, textbook nature of what I think this term means today.
Sure.
Let's start with something nice and simpler, like Pitch Perfect. Mm-hmm. If you haven't seen those movies, there's 3 of them. I've only seen the first 2, and I'm going to be like talking about the third one, which I haven't seen. So sorry about that. But Pitch Perfect are a series of movies about a cappella teams that compete. Would you say that was a good description of Pitch Perfect? In the first movie, there are 2 characters who have a lot of great sexy tension.
Aren't they in the shower together at one point?
They're in the shower together.
That was very surprising. Hold on. Just going into that movie being like, okay, it's like Anna Kendrick, and like they're doing a cappella, and then there's like, whoa, there is like a weirdness here.
Yeah, it's a long shower scene.
It's Anna Kendrick and Brittany Snow, Chloe, and Becca. And their portmanteau is Chloe. And, tangent side, like, just praise any PTB that's listening. Like, thank you for saving us from a Xena Gabrielle portmanteau. Because, I hate them.
I hate that. I mean, they're always awkward.
That's showing how old we are.
Well, wouldn't it just be like Warrior Bard now?
Yeah,
like
it's the new Warrior Bard. Thing. You're right. That's fine.
I guess. I'm still kind of like, eh. Can't they just be Xena and Gabrielle?
Yeah. I mean, you're right, Vera. It would be like that. But anyway, Zabrielle. I still don't like it. Anyway, there was a lot of, people picking up on the subtext. Obviously, very fun. Everybody's familiar with this process. Created the fandom, the Chloe fandom, to the point where in the third movie, what you started to see was actual marketing from the film marketers themselves, aiming their tweets and whatnot at this particular audience to get people excited and talking about the movie. So there's one tweet in particular that was like from the Universal Twitter, official marketing Twitter, that was a GIF of scenes from the third movie that were very suggestive, and with text over it that's like, is Chloe, using the actual portmanteau, gonna happen? And like little hearts all over the place, and all this stuff. And then of course it ends up being, from what I've gathered, like that was all the footage.
Oh my god!
Like basically in the GIF. And you also have like, I'm not saying anything bad about Brittany Snow or Anna Kendrick. I feel like they would probably be people who are like on board and were like into it, but like that don't have like control over their source material and or like marketing at all. So they might be like more of an example of a fan service kind of situation. Somebody can speak to that who knows it better than I do. But I feel like that is just a very, very simple and clear like example of, here is a official team of people taking a queer relationship and marketing to queer fans in a way that is very much attempting to bait them
to see their movie.
Go see the movie and be excited about the movie and talk about the movie for something that they know very well is not really even in the movie.
I mean, what's so amazing about that is the fact that they're selling it with a GIF, and that GIF is the entirety of the queerness from the movie.
What I've gathered, it's a good majority.
So they show that to people being like, come see our movie, and the entire rest of the movie, there's nothing for them there.
Yeah. So it's that kind of thing that I find really gets on my case very, very much.
Yeah. So the other recent example is Betty and Veronica.
Betty and Veronica and Riverdale. Were in the trailers for the show. The first episode had a Betty and Veronica kiss, but it was just very much part of the marketing and not actually part of their relationship. I do know that there is a queer couple on the show now. I don't know their names. I don't watch Riverdale.
Are they girls or boys?
Girls. girls. And I'm not talking about like Jughead and his asexuality and whatever they're doing or not doing there. But yeah, so that was like, oh, look what we have on this show. It's in the trailer, and it's not a thing.
Yeah, and Rizzoli and Isles is a really good example too of something that's like takes a step and it's a little bit more egregious. Like I feel like all these examples are getting like worse and worse on like what the creators do and whatnot. Rizzoli and Isles is definitely a show I watched because it was just two lady leads and they have a good time. They did a lot of like fake outs, like, oh, we're a couple on the show, like for cases and like whatever if the guys hit on them. So that was fun, right? But it was like 5 seasons or more. I mean, I sort of fell off, I have to admit. But the show was very famous for showrunner Janet Tamaro was like, oh, the lesbian theory endlessly amuses me, and it amuses the cast. Rizzoli and Isles have been Rizzoli and Isles have been heterosexual from the first episode, so there is no way I would want to interfere with my viewers' fantasy lives, right?
Okay.
And so they play up like they have.
But I love laughing at them.
It amuses.
It amuses, yeah. And so they have all these like photo shoots. Like this is from like a big TV Guide one where they were like handcuffed together. You know, there's like they're always like on picnic blankets and whatever. And then there's a really interesting quote by Angie Harmon where she says that they literally do takes for that demo.
Right.
Yeah. So she says, I'll brush by Mara's blouse or maybe linger for a moment. As long as we're not being accused of being homophobic, which is not in any way true and completely infuriating, I'm okay with it. So she's claiming that's not homophobic, and they're doing takes specifically for a demo that watches their show. But meanwhile, like showrunners, like, oh, but they're very straight.
Yeah. I feel like it's a really low bar when all you care about is not being accused of homophobia. Right. That is not the same as celebrating and validating queer identities. That is like literally the least you could do.
Literally the least. I mean, I guess it's not the least, but it's quite down there.
Yeah. I don't have it directly in front of me, but there was another quote by the showrunner where she basically was like, I'm very much paraphrasing, but she was basically like, why do you guys think that they're gay together just because one of them has a raspy voice?
Oh boy.
Which really, that amused me.
My job today is to bring to the table
all
the boy / examples.
There are many and very large.
There are many, so we're not going to go into any of them too much in depth because you've probably heard about most of them already. But one of the most like kind of hot and cold examples that I could find was Teen Wolf.
Okay.
Which was huge for a while.
Oh boy, I watched that too.
I remember people, like, maybe in the first 2 seasons of Teen Wolf talking about it like it was gonna be the, like, show that would finally validate queer fans.
Right, because it was MTV. It looked cool. It had camera work and stuff.
A lot of hot young people.
Hot young people everywhere. Most of them boys.
Jeff Davis was the showrunner. He was gay. So people felt, oh, this is someone who's going to protect us. He, at first, was very, very delighted by his audience. And he was delighted by the main ship, which was Steric, Styles, and Derek. There was this famous video that the 2 actors did where they were on a ship. They were promoting, like, they were nominated for something for the Teen Choice Awards. So they were like, vote for us for the Teen Choice Awards. Look, we're on a ship. Everybody thought this was great at the time. But a critic warned, hey, there's a fine line between acknowledgement and queerbaiting. Oh. Even then, people were like, this is feeling very baiting. And lo and behold, about a year later, things had soured in that fandom. Like, you wouldn't believe. The show basically just never delivered at all at any of that. Derek and Styles almost never even had scenes together.
Wow. Right. And like half the cast left.
Half the cast left.
It became a shit show.
It became a shit show in the very literal sense. Yeah. It was shit. Jeff Davis said to people, the truth is no show is written by fans. Great. Thanks for reminding people who's in charge. Jeff Davis. Then Tyler Posey, the lead, had this to say about Steric. I think Steric is a bizarre, weird, twisted thing. And I think that anyone who pays more attention to Steric than the show isn't watching the show for the right reasons.
Oh, no.
Everyone should know he does not play either Styles or Derek.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
He's like, watch me, it's my show.
You're right. This may be coming from a place of insecurity, of just feeling like, wow, I'm being marginalized like by my own fan base. But don't do that, man. Weird, bizarre, twisted thing.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's like, they get... I don't even know if they have permission to do this, but this is like the kind of cast that would read fanfic.
They were so fan positive, and they really encouraged that relationship to be open. Like, I think they had like fan art contests. Like, yeah.
But a lot of the times when casts do, get wind of the fanfic for their characters, which probably not anymore, but like back in the day, they were like, "What is this?"
Well,
they would read it for laughs.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like you should not ever give actors fanfic to read. Ever.
Sometimes it's good.
I don't know. Just don't do it. It's odd. It's like, it's not, I don't know. There's like realms. Don't cross some of the realms. Like for me anyway, I always just find that a little, you're reading about like yourself and like the things that people are writing. You know what I mean?
I always like the position that, like some authors have where they're like, I'm cool with this existing. Like, I'm not going to throw a hissy fit like Diana Gabaldon or George R. Martin.
No. I don't mean like authors.
But I think it's
mean
similar
like
in that you're saying, I know it's there. Don't show it to me because there are legal issues with doing that. Mm-hmm. I think that should be the attitude of actors as well. I know it's out there. It's great. Don't show it to me.
Yeah.
It's for you. This is related to queerbaiting, but this is kind of like a whole other topic that I'm sure we'll also get into, which is kind of that larger question of like fan base and creator and what the relationship between the two should be in general. But yeah, I think we're a little bit like now I think people have this sense of fandom and kind of the people who inspired the fandom just exist side by side and should be like acknowledging each other and like I want to see the actors like on Tumblr talking to me. But like we're from a slightly older generation where we're like, no, I don't want to see you. Like I don't want you to know about me. I think as like we're all like creating fan works and it's so much easier to put fan works out there if you know that the people you're writing about or vidding about aren't looking at it. And like Vera, I know
don't look at me.
You have had some of your vids watched by people who are in the vids, and it's a very complicated experience like when that happens, because that just isn't the audience for the vid or for the fic. And I think that's to me what's so hard about it is it's like someone is kind of being forced into your space who doesn't belong there.
True, but if their reaction is very positive,
sure, it's nice. It's nice, but it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and most of the time, like people, I see it on Twitter all the time where people tweet their vids to like the cast who is contractually obligated to be there for that show. So, and then the cast has to respond being like, cool, thank you, like, I love it, and stuff like that. And, like, that makes the person who made it feel validated or whatever.
And, of course, if you're the person who made something and you want to show it to people, props to you. That's your choice. Like, you're choosing who your audience is, and I think that's all right. Like, the really bad examples are the ones where, like, a talk show host will take a fic and just, like,
that stuff
spring it on the actors without permission from the person who made it. And it's for laughs.
Right.
It's just to laugh at, like, oh, I can't believe somebody, like, is into this, and you're like, thanks,
right?
Like, that's great. Make the joke about the fans, not about
jokes.
Yeah,
it was jokes. Yeah, yeah. Ooh.
Continuing with the boy /
great. I'm just gonna take a break and leave.
Get a cigarette.
Yeah.
Supernatural. What probably, I think if you were just to like walk up to fans on the street being like, what's the most queer baiting show of them all? I think most would say Supernatural. But that's debatable, and obviously it just depends on like what spheres of fandom you go into. But this one is just so infamous and so tortured. Yeah. And it's just been on so long.
Tortured.
Yes, 13 years?
Yeah, now renewed for 14.
Yeah. And lots of men.
Only basically men.
Yeah.
And a small cast.
There are so few women on that show to begin with who survive
creators.
for longer than like a season.
Right.
And who are very, who have had, this is one of the things I feel like we'll talk about like with Xena too, is like how people's things they say can like change and evolve. So I feel like Supernatural's been on for 13 years. You're going to have people say things that change and evolve over time.
They've also had multiple showrunners.
So and multiple showrunners
different brains,
and multiple things. But I do feel like at least early on, particularly, I feel like that would be a show where the interaction between like fandom and the production would be very uncomfortable. Or like the people making the show would be uncomfortable, but then started to embrace it because of
and I think they've only begun to embrace it in like the last couple of years, which shows how long history they've had of being awful.
We actually watched an episode of Supernatural.
We did. The two.
I love that you're like, we have a confession.
Yeah, we did.
No,
we watched an episode of Supernatural.
I've seen more than an episode.
Yeah, Katie actually knows the show.
I used to watch it. But we watched, I feel like this is an interesting example of that fan and creator balance that we were getting into, where they have, much like Xena before it, very meta episodes that involve fandom and involve the actual like making of the show. So we watched one of these episodes. There are a
more
few.
recent one.
A more recent one. It was the 200th episode. It was called Fan Fiction, not to be confused with the episode that we started watching by mistake, which was called Slash Fiction, which was not about anything.
Wow, that's how you know you've got a really meta show when it has two different fandom titles.
But this episode was a musical, and it involved female fans of the book series that is based on Sam and Dean within the world of the show.
The Xena's Girls.
Like the Xena's Girls. It's very, you could write a thing. Like, some of this stuff, like, wouldn't exist without Xena before it. I'm not kidding. I'm really not kidding. The real characters happen to end up at the production of this musical based on the fake characters from the book.
It's in a girls' school.
It's in a girls' school, so they're all gender bent. In terms of how the characters are being played.
Cosplaying
and
Sam and Dean.
Yes.
Basically.
And the actual characters start seeing the big fandom ships getting played out in the musical, such as Destiel, which is Dean, and Castiel, which I think is the actual biggest one. I feel like we'll like put Wincest to the side slightly because it is a big ship, but it's also that involves way more topics.
They're brothers who kiss.
But Destiel is like the biggest one. And at the end of that episode, they sort of create this overarching statement that's like, we have our way and you fans have your way, and that's fine.
And this is after, the bulk of the episode in which they're like, ew. But at the end they come to like weary acceptance and you're like, inspiring.
Inspiring. It does have, I have to shout out though, my favorite song of all time, that song Single Man Tear, which is written specifically for me and very knowing
and
about
itself. That's really speaking
to
the fan base in a way that feels real. Yeah, that they get it there.
But that's an interesting example of like how stuff can get written into the shows on purpose, and that in a very explicit way, not in terms of how they're actually just writing the characters on a day-to-day basis that people read subtextually. That's literally in the show that they're addressing the topic.
But we should also note that Destiel, that ship, like, even as they were celebrating their fans in the 200th episode, they were doing the thing of, like, keeping those characters deliberately apart so that the fandom wouldn't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So it's, giving with one hand and taking away and sort of being like, we're happy you're here doing this, but, like, we're not going to help you.
Do you think Castiel was introduced to kind of squash Wincest?
That's an interesting perspective. I think you probably could read that in. I don't watch the show closely enough to...
Don't talk about these boys, talk about these boys
instead.
We don't want you talking about any of them.
The incest, yeah.
Interesting. It should, again, be reiterated that we don't watch or go here.
Yeah,
So
we do not go to here.
We've been in fandom long enough that we've kind of watched the show by osmosis, but at the same time, we don't really get it in the way that I'm sure people who have followed it closely do.
I could say the same thing with, like, there are other huge examples in recent times that are just, like, places that we don't go, like Once Upon a Time.
Right.
Would be
You've
a
seen
big
some
one.
of that, too.
I did watch it, yeah.
Yeah.
A little
It's funny
bit.
that even the ones we're like, we don't
I
go
just mean,
here,
like,
but we've seen most of it.
No. There's a difference between, like, I watched a couple seasons of Once Upon a Time. I wasn't in the fandom, so I can't really speak to, what's his name, Kitsis. And
Horowitz.
Horowitz.
Yeah. Like, and well, maybe I can a little bit.
We're going to talk about once.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right, we'll get to it.
Yeah, we'll get to
All
it.
right. What
So,
else we got?
boys, continue. Get rid of these boys.
My
Get rid
final,
of
well,
them.
I have one boy
Just
/ pairing in my pocket for later. I've put a
Okay.
pin in it. But for now, the final one I'd like to bring to your attention is Sherlock,
Okay.
which maybe is even more infamous than Supernatural, just because Stephen Moffat, who runs Sherlock along with Mark Gatiss, is the worst.
He is the
He
worst.
is absolutely the worst.
And Sherlock also comes from a longer history
Yes.
of Sherlock existing.
Of Sherlock existing and being shipped with Watson.
Yes.
It's a 100-year-old ship.
Yeah.
So, the fact that Stephen Moffat feels like he owns that character and, like, owns that interpretation, just his general attitude of superiority is so stupid.
Well, I mean, that's just him in general.
Yeah.
For everything he does, he is the worst. Let's reiterate.
Kind of the worst thing that's happened in recent memory with him and his fan base. He's another one, like Supernatural. He's written the fans into the show unlike in Supernatural, it was really, I thought, in a pretty disrespectful way. He made fun of them and kind of just used it as an excuse for Sherlock to kiss Moriarty, like, just for funsies.
Moriarty, played by a woman.
No,
Played by
Andrew
man.
Scott.
Oh, sorry.
You're
I
thinking
think
of Elementary.
yes.
But no, yeah, boy
Right.
kisses.
That's the thing, because I was literally just thinking about Elementary, where they got around all this by, like, gender swapping half the cast to be, like, women, so it's okay for you to ship Sherlock and Watson there, because it's like a man and a woman.
Oh, I haven't, again, another show where I don't go here, but Elementary, I don't know if they ever really went there with the romance.
But they would be okay with it if
I don't
did.
know. Maybe, I mean, I would love if they were just as uncomfortable and not okay. If people were like, "We ship these characters," and they were like, "No, that's not what we're doing."
They would pull a Chris Carter, where, like, "Oh, this is never going to happen. It's never going to happen," and then it does, because that's what happens with any heterosexual long-term show.
You know,
with
it'll
like
happen.
2 leads. Yeah,
it'll happen in the last episode, but it'll happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what's wrong with the dynamic of a show like Rizzoli and Isles, because
Right.
that's the dynamic. Why isn't it the dynamic?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
can't it be the
It
dynamic?
should happen in the last episode.
I'm very fascinated by the upcoming reboot of Cagney and Lacey.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But
was
it
a
is on
thing.
CBS, guys.
Oh shit! Do not get your hopes up. Oh god.
Okay, continue with Sherlock.
Sherlock. So yeah, in 2016, Stephen Moffat got on his high horse at some event and was talking about.
I'm sorry. When is he not on?
He
just
climbed
lives
up
on
his
it.
high horse onto an even higher horse and was talking about why queer representation was important. And
Stephen Moffat.
Stephen
talking about
Moffat
He's
it.
gonna
was.
solve it.
Oh,
for us.
I'm excited.
I'm not even going to read to you what he had to say about that. But the fans who at this point were awaiting the 4th season of Sherlock saw that, finally, as Stephen Moffat promising them what they had always thought he had promised, which was, oh, we are going to make John Locke canonical. I would say Sherlock is a very notable example of queerbaiting in that the fan base was completely... I shouldn't say the whole fan base. A small minority of the fan base was completely convinced that this had been the intention all along, that they'd laid this groundwork for John Locke, and that finally at the end of the show they were going to come together. So when Stephen Moffat said this about the importance of representation, the fan base was just like, hallelujah, yay! Then they got season 4 of Sherlock, which, surprise, they were not a couple in it. It was a really terrible season of the television show. I could say just bad on every level. Mean-spirited. I think that's what's so horrible about an example like Sherlock, is that it actually just became more and more mean-spirited just towards the characters in general. Moffat, when he heard about this response to his comments about queer representation, he was like really obnoxious about it. He got on an even higher horse and said, "It is infuriating, frankly, to be talking about a serious subject matter and to have Twitter turn around and say, oh, that means Sherlock is gay. Very explicitly, it does not. We are taking a serious subject here, and you are trivializing it beyond endurance."
Wow. He turned it around on the fans. It's your fault.
He considers the accusations of queerbaiting to be trivializing a serious topic.
Jesus.
So I don't even know where to begin with that. He's the worst. I think that's even worse than Tyler Posey and the Bizarre Twisted Thing. Because here's someone who's I'm an ally, I'm doing good, and you're trivializing. Mm-hmm. Like, you're the enemy.
Like, you're doing the queerbaiting, fans.
So there's Sherlock for you.
I mean, yeah. Stephen Moffat, like, I just don't even know what people expect from him. That man cannot be trusted with anything.
No, don't give him your toys.
Well, you should never trust any creator.
That's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
Trust no one.
Trust no one.
Especially not Chris Carter.
Yeah, well, this is my own thing. I feel like I was saying something along these lines recently, just in the sense that, like, I think there are, like, people who are really amazing, especially now, who are doing, like, real great work in media, and, like an Emily Andras, who runs Winona Earp. But, I wouldn't even run around saying, like, I'm going to trust her to always do the right thing. I don't think you should ever trust someone who's running an ongoing multi-season storyline show with doing exactly what you want at all times, because, like, eventually they might do something that's gonna frustrate you or that you're not gonna like, and then you're like, I can't trust them anymore, and
you should burn their house down.
I think that's like, oh, you should like just be like, these people are great, I'm gonna like support and be into their work, and not put so much like emphasis on the idea that, like, this person is never gonna burn me or hurt me.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because I feel like, certainly when I was coming up watching TV, I trusted the showrunner for a different reason. I trusted the showrunner to be capable of telling an amazing story, start to finish, right? And I feel like nowadays it's more like, I trust you to, put X representation in and stuff like that. And whatever their overall vision of a story is no longer the forefront, Interesting.
So you have lower expectations for showrunners, is what you're saying.
No, I think that's what I think people do.
Yeah.
I think that the story, in a way, doesn't matter as long as they have the representation that they want to see.
But isn't
visible.
The representation and the story, it's hard to separate them, because you can have a story that really makes the representation toxic.
That's what the trouble is. That's why you can't trust the showrunner, because, like, what do you do then? You run into a block because
So
maybe let's talk about...
That was my tea. I fell down the tea bag into the water.
Did you spill some tea?
I did spill some tea. No, I mean, I think that, it's just like they're really, for me, the trust issue is mostly story-based, and it kind of goes back to, like, a Chris Carter type, where, like, everybody has their one show that they start with, and you're like, they know what they're doing, everything's fine, this is great, everything's good, oh, and then all of a sudden it's not, and then you learn from then on to be like, okay, you just gotta go with it, and, like, you like it or you don't. Yeah, in terms of just story.
Cool, so let's continue rolling with these examples.
I think we should move on now to shows that actually do have representation, but are still queerbaiting.
Right.
So no Once Upon a Time.
Oh, they do actually have some queer characters in there. I don't watch
go there
the show
anymore.
But I know they did do some, in part because of the pressure.
Very recently in their last season. Yeah. While the main ship is, like, one of those actors is no longer on the show.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
I think she's coming back for the finale, though.
Well, Once Upon a Time will can sort of work its way into this. So you're talking about, like, the really fascinating double-edged sword examples of The 100 and Supergirl in the fact that they both did something really awesome and really progressive, and then also simultaneously did the worst thing ever.
Oh, here we go. We're diving in.
So, you want to go chronologically? You want to start with The 100?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, so The 100, wow. I go there.
We all went.
Big time.
I went there, but I do not go there anymore.
Yeah, this one, ooh.
I still go.
I still go too. Yeah, The 100 is a show on the CW. It has a lead female, and in, season 2, they introduced, like, a cool lady.
A warrior princess, would you say?
Yeah. Actually, well, they were used, Clark and Lexa were used in a vid that Katie and I found as an example of...
an Uber.
An Uber, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a reincarnated Xena and Gabrielle.
It's pretty perfect.
It is kind of amazing, yeah. So Lexa was introduced as a recurring character, and the big relationship pairing in the fandom at the time was Clark and Bellamy, a man. So Belark, right, was like the thing, and then suddenly Clexa started happening.
Yes.
And it was a thing that the showrunners were suddenly like, you know what? Sure. Why not? Why not do this? And it was like so progressive to have a showrunner go around doing interviews. This is Jason Rothenberg.
Oh, I was thought we were going to,
the hero
Voldemort him.
of the story.
Oh, jeez.
Okay.
He's the hero
Have
of
we
the story.
found someone even worse than Stephen Moffat?
Oh, God, yeah.
No.
Kind of. I
My
don't
beef
know.
with Moffat goes way back
yeah.
to Doctor Who. He destroyed that show. I was really big in that fandom.
Both
Sorry,
live
I have
on
a
an
lot of
island
personal
together.
problems with Stephen Moffat.
But Rothenberg.
But Rothenberg is who we're talking about now. So, yeah, I remember reading those interviews where he was like, this is the future. There is no, like, sexual preferences. Clark can, like, kiss a girl if she wants to. That's totally cool. And you're like, oh, my God, this is amazing. And then they kiss. And you're
I
like,
know.
oh,
It was such a
my God.
moment. Like, because up till then, they'd had this relationship that was sort of tense and interesting, and they weren't really sure what it was, and you as the
Yeah.
audience weren't really sure what it was.
Yeah.
And, like I feel like as a joke, I started being like, now kiss.
Yeah, and then they did.
Which is what you do. And
Right.
then they did, and I was just
So-
like, what?
Exactly. So this is a perfect example of what any subtexters do, like in their fic or watching a show, right, that has just like whatever, 2 leads. Like you're watching Brazilian Isles and you're waiting for them to kiss, and then can you imagine? And then they do, and you're like, I can't believe I'm watching this. This is the year 2K. What is it at that time? 215. And it was like amazing and so progressive to have like the showrunner
the
team.
year now times.
Yeah, exactly. So it was time to see that actually canon, and it felt great. I have to say, I loved seeing the rise of Clexa in the fandom over Blark. I was definitely cheering that on. I really thought that was...
really, like, participating.
I wasn't participating. I was definitely lurking.
I
already fought my battles in the trenches of, like, the shipper wars in Doctor Who fandom back
me
in
too.
2009. So I didn't need it anymore.
Yeah.
But I loved seeing it happen. I loved seeing my team winning. Okay? I did. I fucking did. I loved it. I'm going to say it. I loved it so hard.
This is where we're gonna get, someone's gonna hear this, and we're gonna start getting like 100 fans, like male, and
I'm sorry, but too bad.
I
It
don't
was a
go
great-
here, just to remind you, I don't go here anymore. Don't
Fine,
include
send
me.
all the hate mails to me. But you know what? It felt great and validating to see something that wasn't typical. A typical thing is the heteronormative ship. When you see a male lead and a female lead, they're always going to be together because that's how TV works. So,
And we're, as we've said, we're old.
Yeah, we're old.
This is, now that it is 2018, like, we'll get into this more, but like, I grew up watching shows not expecting this to happen.
Right.
So, like,
exactly.
it was still a novelty.
Yeah.
Horribly so.
Like, Xena and Gabrielle was, like, as far as it went for me back then.
You know what I mean?
And
You're
for,
like,
all of us. Yeah. So, it was very surprising, and it was very impressive, and it was very just progressive, and, like, every good thing about it was happening, and I just couldn't believe I was watching this, and I had hope for the world etc. So they did that and it was great. And then like the next season, well, the actress who plays Lexa suddenly got a job on a different show, and you go, uh-oh, what does this mean?
Right.
So, she's not promoted to series regular on the show you're watching, so you know something is going to happen with your ship. You may suspect things, probably in the season finale.
I think even more than suspect, you fear.
You accept.
I feared.
Because
she kept getting into dangerous situations and then surviving, and I was like, oh, thank God.
Liv, you're a veteran TV watcher. You know how these things work. If she gets a job on another show, she's going to leave the show that you're watching. So you suspect
there are some
things.
ways to do that don't involve death.
Of course.
But there are also ways to do stuff inherent in the character that I felt like this fandom would have been okay with, that they did not do, that could have included that particular outcome for the character.
She'd had an arc where she was courting death. She was doing all these progressive things for her people that clearly they weren't cool with. It seemed like she was putting herself in a dangerous situation.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was like an amazing story. You're watching it, you were like riveted. Simultaneously to this, on Twitter, what was happening was the creators, the stars, everybody was like rah-rahing this, but especially Jason Rothenberg, who was like all over being like, this is great. I mean, he was fighting with the Belarks. He like that every week.
He still hates the Belarks.
This is in my mind, for the episode that we are talking about right now and for the subject that we were talking about right now, like one of the most intensely awful and malicious ways that people have been queerbaited that I have ever seen in my entire life. Continue with the story.
So he's on Twitter, he's spreading that rainbow around, he's fighting with the Belarks, and they're filming like the finale, so he's like...
season finale of season 3.
Yeah, so he's like, everyone come down, watch us film, we're filming outside in Vancouver where you can watch it. And so people do, they have photos of the actors, including Lexa is there. Everyone's like, okay, great, that's the season finale, so like we have this.
The photo of the two of them, of Clark and Lexa, or actresses who play them.
Yes.
They're like hanging out on set, and they both specifically have these rainbow strips of candy. So it was just very celebratory.
Yeah.
And people see that and say, okay, so my ship is going to last at least
till the finale.
13 episodes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny that you should mention that word, because then the big episode, kind of like in the middle of the season, called 13, was being pushed very hard by Jason Rothenberg, who, the hero of our story, was like, this is the greatest episode we've ever done. Everyone has to tune in. It's going to be perfect. And you're sitting there watching it at 7 a.m. in the morning. That is me.
I watched it on an airplane.
Well, congratulations. I fucking was like, I missed it the night before, turned all of my notifications off or everything. I was like, not seeing any spoilers. Here I am, so excited. And then, boom, they kill Lexa unexpectedly in the middle of the season after like the worst tropey situation ever, which is like they finally had sex.
It was the paint by numbers.
Yeah, it was like he walked into all of the tropes, like right then and there.
She's just randomly shot.
Yeah, she's killed accidentally, basically.
Yeah. It wasn't, you often hear about getting, doing something because it serves the story. This served nothing. This came out of left field and then left out of right field. And you're like, okay, what? Like my personal reaction was like I felt duped because I was expecting a big heroic death in the finale. A romantic death.
Yeah. And then, I'm not saying that I didn't love all the acting that happened in the episode, which they are just beautiful scenes between the two of them. But I was expecting to have more of Lexa in the season.
Right.
And
that's because you were led to believe by the people making the show.
By the biggest villain now.
And their marketing for the show and what they did on social media, which is very much queerbaiting and very much 100,000,000% what not to do.
Right.
And they cannot do this.
They did the thing where the fans were outraged and they came down so hard. And so...
Yeah, he locked up. He didn't talk. Yeah. So the writer of the episode Javier, who did our fake Xena reboot almost.
Yeah, and the episode in question was written by Javier.
Yeah, so he fell on the sword, and he had to interact with everyone.
And he did a great job on Tumblr, I think.
Yeah, so...
he learned a lot from that experience.
Yeah. I mean, and then later Rothenberg had to apologize and was like, oopsies, you know.
Great, we feel better now.
So, yeah.
Right. This is actually very harmful. This is a very harmful thing to do to people who are very, very hurt by what happened. We're now several years down the line, so we've seen the repercussions of it. And as we said, like we started the episode with, Klaxicon is happening this weekend. And then this plot line specifically also started the LGBT Fans Deserve Better site.
Right. Because 2K16 was a hard one where all the deaths.
Yeah,
that's
this is a different that's a different topic.
Guys, I know what's probably on your mind right now. We're not going to discuss it now. It is going to be later for a separate episode down the line. So put a pin in what you're thinking about. Yeah. We're not quite going there right now.
But to stay on topic with the actual idea of queerbaiting, like it sets up an expectation and then you're excited and you think that you're going to see something that you've always wanted to see, and then you get the rug pulled out from under you. Either that, or you just get nothing, like, basically. Or I don't want to call subtext nothing, because I think that's a much more complicated topic now, because I think that for a person who's very fanish, like, the process of, like, picking up on subtext and, like, creating ships out of it is still and always will be super fun and amazing, which might be a good lead into Supergirl.
Yep.
But I just do want to say, like, that's why that in the year 2018 or 2018, if we'd like to call it, the reason this is so harmful is because, and obviously we have many steps to go, but like, we live in an age where we can have this. The consciousness of this country, at least where like Hollywood is making shows, like has changed to the point where you can now expect that these relationships can be canon. Right. And you want them to be. Whereas 20 years ago, like you're saying, like, it's not that you expected it, it's that literally there was censorship stopping it from happening, which we will get into.
So yeah, Supergirl.
Supergirl. I said that thing about subtext because for me with Supergirl, I think that like the subtextual ships, femme/ships on that show, for me are the appeal and not the canonical ships.
I have a thing with all the canonical ships on Supergirl, and that's both the het ships and the gay ships, where I find them boring. I don't like the writing for the most part.
Right. Yeah.
Like, for Sanvers, I loved Alex's part in that. I loved seeing, like, her coming to terms with her identity. I thought that was...
She had an amazing coming out story. Like,
really powerful writing. But the actual relationship with Maggie was a snooze to me. There just wasn't anything that interesting those characters ever had to say to each other.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt that way about basically everybody that Kara's, like, ever been with. I'm just like, oh, so boring. Can we fast forward?
Right. Yeah. So we fast forward, and suddenly we have Lena Luthor, played by Katie McGrath, who, remember, cannot breathe, like, any kind of straight vibes.
No.
She is so, like, just...
She's Lucy.
She's Lucy. She has chemistry Lucy. With any, like, woman she's
That's so funny.
With.
Lucy, the next generation.
She is. It's so true.
And that's going all the way back to Merlin.
Which I definitely went there. Oh, my God.
Oh, listen, I mean, I don't want to talk about Merlin.
Terrible show.
But there's more.
But it's actually fascinating because she comes from Merlin, and she survived a big fandom there that shipped Arthur and Merlin. So she's, unlike all the rest of the actors on the show, familiar with what a fandom does.
Yes. And an excellent example of a person and who knows fandom and also loves it, or is accepting of it. And that also makes all the difference, which I feel like you will see as well with Xena and everybody involved in Xena. Supergirl, unfortunately, like, did not have that, or they learned.
I mean, we'll see how well they've learned.
Yeah, so Supergirl, it has some problems, like, overall, in terms of showrunners switching out, a huge difference between, like, season 1, it was filmed in LA, had a completely different cast, and then it moved to
different
Vancouver.
Priorities.
Yeah, different cast, different priorities, moved to Vancouver in season 2, different cast, new priorities, and then new showrunner,
New network,
all sorts of stuff. Some changes I liked, some changes I did not. But one of the things that was really good about season 2 is that they introduced Lena and Luther, as we mentioned, Katie McGrath, and scenes between Lena and Kara suddenly had like a spark that you were excited to see.
In part because this is the grand tradition of having the hero and a character who you know someday is probably going to be a villain becoming friends, in the grand Smallville tradition of Lex and Clark.
Which was a big ship.
Not to be confused with Lexa and Clark. And yeah, that was a huge ship at the time.
Klex.
I guess Klex.
It is. Klex is huge.
And Supergirl, I think, aspires to be Smallville in a lot of ways. So introducing Lena to me seemed like, okay, we're gonna do a Lex and Clark kind of storyline, and I was so there for it.
Yeah, and so the further it went, the more the fandom kind of like started circling that ship and growing. So you had Sandverse, that's the canonical lady ship, and then this exciting new thing that was happening. And then you get like riled up because then Lena is promoted to series regular for season 3, right? Which is what we wanted for Lexa. So you're like, oh my God. And suddenly
she's safe now. She's there.
She's
in the
there
show.
all the time.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do? They're definitely gonna make this canon, right? Because, Kara's an alien. Why not? Like, sexuality should matter for her too, right?
And she had this, like the first season was all about her coming out of the closet as a superhero, and that metaphor was very clear.
Yep.
So it felt like if you're going to do the metaphor, why not take a step and do it textually?
You have these fascinating aspects of their relationship where Supergirl's constantly saving Lena Luthor, but it is Kara that Lena loves. And that's so reversed of, let's say, James and Superman, right? Because I think he loves Superman.
Oh, that's your ship, your secondary ship.
I mean, it's a really interesting thing to point out because what has happened when making Lena a series regular is that they introduced an absolutely, for no reason, out of left field punch in like the fandom's teeth, which is they are pairing Lena with James.
I think to shut down.
It is to shut down. It's absolutely to shut it down, and that's just literally like. It just feels so wrong. Like, it honestly makes me, like, not want to watch the show anymore. Because I could put up with, like, the bad stories if I got my, like, 2 scenes with Supercorp. But, like, not if that's... Now I have to watch her kiss James. I don't want that. Like, While that is pretty egregious, I thought that the way that the actors handled the concept of Supercorp last Comic-Con, I believe, was kind of like the worst offense. So that's the famous kind of like video of Jeremy Jordan singing about how they're just friends.
Never gonna happen.
Yeah.
However.
Yeah.
Whatever the lyrics were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
that's the giant mouth saying you're delusional.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely.
And then you had sweet Katie McGrath trying to walk the comments back, being like, the great thing about what we do is, like any art, anyone can read into it.
Is that
what
your Irish accent?
Oh, that's her doing an American accent terribly in my voice.
I'm sorry, I interrupted that.
That's okay, that's fine. But she was like, kind of like, you guys can do it, it's fine. So that's similar to something that actually happened on Once Upon a Time, as I said we would mention it, which is I remember very specifically the Twitter wars between the fandom and like the actors who weren't involved in Swan Queen, right?
Yeah.
So like Lana Parrilla, she's totally okay with the fandom like doing that and like supports it and whatnot. But I remember like the guy who played Grumpy, one of the dwarves got into it, man.
Oh no!
And it was like, it's never gonna happen, never gonna happen. They're just friends or whatever, basically.
Basically the same
in
song.
the same song. And like I was like, who are you to talk about this?
Right.
But yeah, I mean that was just like his reaction because he was like, y'all, you're delusional, basically.
Right.
So
Speaking of all this, I would like to read a quote from a transmedia expert named Alexandra Edwards, who says, "The biggest mistake creators can make is to try to dictate to fan communities how they should be interacting or expressing their fanishness. You have to respect these people who love your work.
Right.
Because I think we are now getting into kind of a larger question, which is about respect.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, even if you have no plans to make something canon, you can treat the people doing their shipping, doing their fanish activities with respect. You don't have to judge them. You definitely don't have to tell them they're delusional. Like, that is, I think, something, like, and again, this is a low bar when you're like,
Low bars.
we don't even need you to canonize, we just need you to not treat us like we're crazy. That would be a nice start.
And that's where the idea that, like, we do need to start canonizing a lot more relationships, because what you're saying is that's, like, the lowest bar, and that, like, creators will then be like,
okay, we can stop there.
We can just give you the bare minimum and you'll be happy.
Well, they give you
course,
the one pair, and they're like, there you go, there's your gaze. Aren't you happy about this? And it's like, well, we maybe are relating more to this other pair instead of the one you gave us. Like,
this is still a really interesting topic that I feel like we could go into, like, a lot more in, like, almost an entirely separate podcast about just about the idea of, like, fanish activity, though, and what's enjoyable.
Yes.
Like, because that's what I was saying about.
yeah.
Yeah, we were all saying about
like-
Supercorp. That's, like, it's not on the show, but that's the more fun
Should be
one.
on the show. It's so much fun.
Once upon a time, though. Just, like, talk about
But
your
that was, like-
compulsive heterosexuality. Like,
Right. But
you
I
know.
mean, that relationship was designed, it was almost like gender swapped when you think about it, where, like, it's designed where those characters are clearly supposed to be, like, the main
Yeah.
couple in a way.
And they both have the same son.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Thinking, though, about why Supercorp is so attractive, like, if you were to make that canon, that would be the show. That would be what the show is about. It would just be so central. I think that's why people don't understand, like, why Sandra's wasn't so meaningful to me, is that it felt
They
like...
were both brunette. Yeah, to have one blond, one brunette.
Yeah, this is so true.
What?
Do you think
Alex,
She
like red
constantly
hair.
dyes her hair like Gabrielle.
Oh, whatever.
But, like, Sanford's to me always felt a bit, you know, just like a cherry on top. Like, they weren't really involved in, like, the big mythological plots.
No,
they had
much smaller
They were a
scenes.
tangent.
Yeah, you would have Monel and Caramel, like, scenes, like, all over the place, right? Because that's the heterosexual main ship, and then you have, like,
here's a
one
little
scene
bit
of-
for you.
Yeah.
I can't
Here's some scraps.
speak for the people writing the show. I know that they would not agree with what I'm about to say, but for me, and especially in the aftermath of something like The 100, I felt like you could feel the tentativeness in their relationship, where they didn't know what to do with them that was going to be good or right, and I felt like you could feel the fear of them writing it in a, like, really like an interesting way. I don't know.
Tentative writing is bad writing. I mean, you need to have a strong vision of what you want those characters to be.
Like, post her coming out story, which I did love.
Yeah. No, I think Alex was written really well. I just don't think, like, they actually knew where they wanted to take it after she came out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Remember when Peggy Carter had to move all the way across the country to get away from Angie? Oh my what
God,
the fuck was
right.
that about? Anyway, never mind.
So I think we've covered maybe all the bad examples that you could possibly want.
These
you
are
have
so
a sense of just how frustrating and toxic, and in some cases just openly homophobic queerbaiting can get.
Yeah.
I would like now to take you on a journey with what I'm going to call a positive case study, non-queer baiting in this day and age.
Yay!
With the show Hannibal.
Ooh.
I do go there. This is a show that I know very well. So, yeah, I can get into this with you guys, and you're just going to have to tolerate me.
It's fine.
She's looking at me. I'm tolerating.
Vera's glaring at me. So Hannibal, we've mentioned it a couple times on the podcast. It's about Hannibal Lecter, who is a cannibal serial killer psychiatrist, and his patient, Will Graham, who is an FBI profiler who is trying to catch Hannibal. It's a pretty small cast, so obviously you see these two men sharing really intense scenes. One wants to eat the other, maybe. This, to an audience right away, seemed kind of gay. So, Brian Fuller, the showrunner, in the first season of the show, gives an interview where he says, "I was surprised at the demographic that the show was reaching. A significant portion was young, smart, well-read women. They really responded to the show. They found joy and hope in something that is arguably quite bleak. I found that really rewarding." So this is kind of similar to a lot of our other case studies where the showrunner finds out about their audience at first and is happy, surprised, like this was not his intent, these were not the people he was necessarily trying to reach, but he's happy to see them there. Okay, he continues to write Will and Hannibal having more and more intense scenes together. He explains that the show felt like an opportunity to explore genuine intimacy between two men who were not sexually attracted to each other, and find out what are the complexities of a male friendship when you get so close to each other, but you don't have a physical way to express affection. So he's clearly saying that he is not going to go there. Like many of our showrunner examples, he's saying that's not what I'm doing, but I am interested in aspects of this. He's kind of saying like subtext is cool and I want to explore it.
Was part of his reasoning behind those earlier statements, or the fact that Hannibal is a cannibal and a murderer?
Hannibal is the villain of the show. That's a very reductive. If you've watched the show, he could just as easily be read as the hero.
Sure.
But he is obviously a criminal doing horrifying things. His relationship with Will, I should add, is quite abusive, especially at first. Like, he gets him institutionalized. He shoves someone's ear down his throat. Like, when you're desperate for gay representation, like, is this the representation you want?
Probably hesitant to.
Which is what Brian Fuller actually said. Yeah. Brian Fuller is gay. So he was like, I didn't want this to represent me. Mm-hmm. I didn't, and this would have been like the first major gay couple Brian Fuller would have written on screen. Okay. So I think he has some actual resistance to this idea simply because it would be buying into another toxic stereotype, which is like the queer-coded villain.
Right.
So he's trying via subtext to have this tension between the characters, but never actually out them. He continues. 2014, since it's like season 2. I think Hannibal is a very broadly spectrumed human being / fallen angel. That's his first attempt to try to label. Who's probably capable and interested in everything humanity has to offer. Whereas Will Graham is very definitely heterosexual, but that does not necessarily prevent us from a homoerotic subtext. It's practically text in a couple of episodes just because we really want to explore the intimacy of these two men in an unexpected way without sexualizing them, but including a perception of sexuality that the cinema is actually portraying to the audience more than the characters are. So, this to me is beginning to sound more and more like Xena.
He's changing,
In case you haven't noticed, that is such a... We talk about Xena, and it sounds like that.
Yeah, agreed.
One more quote from this particular interview where he says, It seems to go beyond physical parameters to this very primal, basic male bonding place.
Oh.
It is free of sexuality and or intimation of sexuality, yet anyone in the audience who is attracted to either of the men will feel that energy. I don't need them to kiss or to display physical intimacy. I think that almost becomes too obvious. I love playing in the suggestive. Brian Fuller, 2016. This is after the 3rd season of the show where Hannibal and Will kill someone together. They're covered in blood. They cuddle, and then they throw each other off a cliff and die.
Hooray!
It didn't start out as being homoerotic as much as it was about an exploration of male friendship, in a way, says Fuller. As a gay man, I've always been fascinated with heterosexual male friendships and seeing patterns of romance and devotion that are not sexualized, but are nevertheless very deeply felt. So it was really about unpacking that in a way. And I think as it progressed, the lines became blurry. Brian Fuller, 2017. This is a tweet. It's in all caps. Climate change is real, and so is Hannagram.
What an evolution.
Hannagram is the ship name, the portmanteau. Brian Fuller, March.
What a timeline.
Their love is definitely queer, and I have to soak in the palm olive of season 4, which is still to come, maybe, to accurately state which other letters of the LGBTQIAPK rainbow they fall under.
All right.
I think there's more than one.
Okay.
So there's your journey with Hannibal. I think this is a great example of what a showrunner could do in that, okay, it's not your intention. You have this very fake-sounding idea about male friendship that you wish to explore.
That sounds fake,
Again, noting
okay.
these are the leads. These are the lead characters.
Yeah.
So it's not like he can do what other showrunners have done and separate them. Like, this is what his show is about. Mm-hmm. But he's hearing from his audience, okay, you're saying the show's about this. We're saying the show's about that. He's listening, and not only is he listening, I think he's reevaluating what he himself had said and realizing, oh, how can I go there? How can I kind of get past my anxiety about poor representation and go there? And I think the answer is, well, make it good representation.
Make it good.
Like, as I said, make Hannibal become the hero in his way. I say respect to Fuller for being not only listening to what people are saying to him, but listening to the work, like doing what feels right for the work.
I think that's especially important. Yeah. Because, like, again, here, another topic that could be another podcast, but, like, representation, is it always happy, fun, sunshine, nice? You know what I mean? Is that how he felt, in the sense that I don't want this to be it because of such and such, and then kind of evolved his thought process on what it could be.
Exploring different kinds of representation, and just I think him seeing the pleasure that his fandom was getting out of this couple made him say, oh, like, yeah, they're serial killers, but like people love them, like they are fun, and I think embracing that.
Yeah, and then again, the importantness of all of this is that, like, it seemed like, for the most part, there's a respectful relationship between him and fandom.
For the most part.
Any fandom's gonna have
he
your
like
problems.
Everybody, he's done things that upset people and didn't react well.
That's why you don't always trust.
Do not worship these people.
No, everyone's a person.
Yeah.
Everyone is a person. But also that it's very much about, like, just trying to make the work the best that it can be, and, you know, it's not technically about, like, pleasing everyone. It's about him dealing with his own process of, like, how he wants to write his show. To me, anyway, is what it sounded like, and not intentionally going out and being like, I'm doing this for an audience to come watch my show, like, and then I'm not going to give you what you want, which is queerbaiting. Like, this is just a queer show being queer.
I think this is a great example of someone who's actually, you know, they get a response and they see what the responders are actually responding to. I feel like a lot of times with queerbaiting, the creators just don't really understand, like, what it is people love. They think, oh, it's like, you know, I put them in a scene together and people love that. I can be like, give them a flirty line and people love that. That's not what people love. People love the dynamics between the characters. Like, again, I don't know Supernatural, like, at all, but I got the sense that it was, like, Castile's fallen angel trying to save Dean thing that people were into. Yeah. Not just the fact that they were men who sometimes said flirtatious things to each other. Right. So I feel like Brian Fuller saw, like, oh, like, people love this character's relationship, and I get it. I see what's queer about this, and I'm going to bring that out in my text.
And this show aired on NBC. Broadcast NBC
owned by Universal.
Oh,
how interesting!
Wow, Wow.
Interesting. How far? Maybe De Beers was one of their advertisers.
I've been watching Hannibal and saw some De Beers. De Beers had no problem being up in there with this murdery
with the cannibals,
man. Let's go back in time.
Yeah, let's now 20 years.
So I feel like, we've kind of gone over the idea of like this implicit queerbaiting, which is just putting in little bits and bobs within a text, and then with the intention of like never like doing anything about it, like a Rosalie Niles perhaps, and then a very explicit marketing and things like that. We've talked about it. All boils down to, for me, like right now, just the idea that like you can do stuff, so why not do stuff? Let's go back in time and talk about Xena. And now that we've like kind of gone over all this stuff, make the case for why people do not need to call it queerbaiting. So I feel like, we just want to like contextualize the idea that here we are on NBC Universal syndicated regular television. You don't even have your premium shows yet,
Ellen hasn't had her coming out episode yet.
1995, not even that has happened yet. Basically, it's the mid-90s. I don't know, how long has it been since, like, the friggin' Hays Code and the movies went away? Like,
25 years? 20
like, you know what I
years,
mean?
yeah.
It's like, it's nuts. So you're coming from a long history in media where you couldn't actually do anything. Everything had to be coded. Everything had to be put on screen in such a way that it would be understandable to a certain audience if you wanted it to be understandable.
But meanwhile, it would fly right over the heads of a mainstream audience.
Right over the heads of a mainstream audience, sometimes right over the heads of that Legion of Decency who looks exactly like you think that they would look.
God, I mean, the Legion of Decency, that's a
bunch
sinister name.
Old white Catholic priest men.
And they could shut movies down, basically, by threatening to boycott them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, then that goes away, and then you start getting slightly more stuff in the 70s and 80s, and that's a whole other problematic can of worms.
And basically nothing on TV,
but
right?
nothing on TV.
TV seems to be much more conservative in the 80s and 90s than movies.
Maybe there's like something for sweeps somewhere. Is there like a soap opera doing something? I feel like Vera might know.
We've talked about
it.
We've
talked about it in the past, like some
All
of the
my
stuff.
children.
But like again, you could probably count on one hand, or maybe a little less than two hands, like examples of like good relationships, good queer relationships on television.
And I have a feeling none that were Saturday morning serials meant in part for an audience of children, which is supposedly what Xena was, and certainly what Hercules was.
And unlike movies, this is TV, so it is paid for by advertising for like the most part. Number one, you have your actual networks with their priorities and rules of what can and can't be shown, and then you have advertisers who like are gonna pull their ads from your content if they don't like it. Oof, I can't believe I said the word content. I freaking hate the word content.
I know, and we had that question on the mailbag about what words we hate. Content. Totally in there.
Yes, content. Ugh.
Art isn't content. It's not a thing you fill a jar with, though we've been doing plenty of that.
I just I have a job where like content is said a lot. Anyway, so like that's the kind of universe in which this show is starting. And it's so important, I feel like, when you're gonna chuck the word queerbaiting at Xena, like to really understand that the staff and the people on this show, once they started to add in more to the story between Xena and Gabrielle, the idea that you could not do it even if you wanted to is like the number one thing to remember.
And that the network was actively in fear of people perceiving it as a lesbian show, as opposed to which movie network, Pitch Perfect's
marketing team.
Was that Universal again?
Yeah.
Shit, Universal's up in all these scandals.
Except they were maybe the De Beers and the Hannibal, we don't know.
But yeah, rather than trying to market a show to queer audiences, like they were like, no, make sure this looks as heterosexual as possible.
Remember they couldn't put two of them in one scene in the credits together because that would be gay.
And then,
which is absurd.
So they were even worried about the shot with Xena and Draco because
like
the ponytail looking look, and people were like, people think that's a woman and this is
gay.
a lesbian. Oh no, no, we can't.
Because of just the anxiety of having a show with two female leads, which is so rare.
Right. So, and it's still rare.
It's still so rare.
So again, like the important thing to kind of pull out from that bit of info is that, executive producer Rob Tappert, this is not a surprise when this stuff starts happening or when the audience starts saying stuff. No, like, he's not surprised.
He sees it too.
Yeah. Like, it was always like something that they knew was something that people could perceive. For starters, because the network was like, oh my God, people are going to perceive it this way. Oh my God. Don't do anything. Oh no. And then, of course, we don't get to talk about Liz Friedman nearly enough.
Liz Friedman, we love you. We love your obsession with Silence of the Lambs.
But having queer creators and producers, again, makes all the difference, I think, too, when you want to have good representation on screen, because she was openly lesbian, and has a magnificent quote. This is from Entertainment Weekly, 1997, so we're a couple seasons.
For third season?
March 7th.
End of third season?
Sure, why not? Here's the article goes. So the character of Xena is regularly shown in the intimate company of men. True, sexual ambiguity is the mainstay of the show, which openly gay Xena producer Liz Friedman is all too happy to admit, quote, I don't have any interest in saying they're heterosexuals. That's just bullshit and no fun either. So let's start there.
Well, I think that's... I like the way she talks.
Yeah.
This is in Entertainment Weekly as well, which is a major mainstream publication for entertainment news in the United States. So I feel like we had been surprised by Entertainment Weekly before, talking about their relationship. And, Lucy Lawless was going on TV interviews in season 1 talking about it. For me, my perspective on the show was like, I've said in the past, something fandom did. And it wasn't anything anybody else knew about. No. Everyone knew about it. The whole country, had, in some way, if you were following entertainment, you could read this. You know what I mean? It wasn't just, hidden in fandom.
Again, kind of interesting to me is just the way that what Rob and Liz and Lucy and Renee said over time really changed dramatically. Unlike some of our other examples, they never denied they were never like, our intention is that they're straight women doing straight women things.
We're exploring female friendship.
Because the show fairly early on had made it clear that just wasn't the case, I mean, as soon as The Quest airs, how can you say that with a straight face? As soon as you have
a straight face?
As soon as you have Xena and Lao Ma, it's very clear that Xena's sexuality is just canonically bisexual.
They're just flying around. They're not fly fucking. It's just flying around as two friends.
Okay, friends who fly. So I like that the journey that these quotes go on is just kind of from being coy about it, kind of saying things like, oh, we don't really think it's anybody's business, what the characters get up to, but we love that stuff. We love playing with that. Rob has a quote where he says, advertisers don't like it, but being coy has certainly kept the interest up.
Now,
being coy.
And keeping the interest up now.
That sounds
away.
Queerbaiting. We blurred the lines, he says, an odd echo of that Brian Fuller quote about the things getting blurry after a while. And that's the thing. You can only blur the lines for so long before the lines fall away. And that's what happens with Xena. Either you draw the line as Supergirl has done with basically like shuttling Lena off to a completely different plot. Or you continue to blur those lines until they don't exist. And now, when they talk about Xena and Gabrielle, it's canon. And I think it's canon in the show.
Right.
I mean, do they ever say so? No. But that, as we've often spoken about, is part of what makes that relationship so meaningful to us, is that they don't define it on screen. You just see it consummated in all these other ways.
Yeah. While we're talking about all these quotes, I do think it's one of the things where I feel like if you want to call Xena queerbaiting and you just go and find a quote that suits your needs, you could take it and go, look what they said at this point. That's queerbaiting. Like, but it's decontextualizing the situation so much. And that just makes me sad.
Yeah, and it's sad because, like that Rob quote from like 1996... After 1996, he not only was being coy and keeping the interest up, he was rewarding that interest. You know, those two characters, like their relationship became the center of the show. You forget that Xena could have easily morphed into something completely different. All those fears that they were actually going to kill Gabrielle off in the first season. Yeah. Like, Xena could have moved on. Like, that could have been what the show was. Like, there was a conscious effort on the part of the showmakers to have Xena and Gabrielle's relationship be the center of the show.
Right, and then suddenly the ratings got better than Hercules, and the audience grew a lot. A specific audience, filled that, and
And I think once
rewarded it.
You've centralized that relationship, it's going to go there.
Yeah.
That I think that's inevitable. They made a choice for that to happen.
In the oral history that they did, Xena Warrior Princess and Oral Her Story from Entertainment Weekly, yet again, that Lucy and Rob and Renee did a couple of years ago, 2015?
Yeah, at the actual 20th anniversary.
15.
Yeah, 2015. That would be the 20th anniversary.
Yes. Yes, I can math. There are a couple relevant bits and bobs in there to what you were just saying, where Lucy said Liz Friedman and Rob knew from the start that this was a natural outcome of having two female action heroes together, like as leads. And then the big difference, again, of course, is the idea of queerbaiting now, where you're just throwing in stuff with no intention of following through, versus here we have Renee saying we were very aware that there was only so much we could do because it was a show on network television. So while Rob would push the envelope as much as he could, he still had to work within certain guidelines. So like envelope pushing versus like just
throwing crumbs.
Throwing crumbs.
Yeah, you see what story Rob Tappert and friends wanted to tell, and they were constricted in the way that they could tell it. But they found a way to tell it, and it's there. And I think if you watch the show, like, this is a very queer show. Yeah.
So one time we did have a queerbaiting discussion already on Comedy of Eros, I believe, where you run into the issue of you have tons of people making a show who say lots of stuff all the time in different ways.
Not everybody gets the memo.
And so that was the one where I feel like Chris Mannheim wrote it and had a fairly dismissive quote about Xena Gabrielle in the subtext that we were very, very disappointed in.
The coin got a jar. The coin got a jar.
Yeah. And it also had that moment, so like contextually with her saying that and then writing the bit where Xena and Gabrielle are about to kiss, but then like Joxer gets in the way.
Right.
Or however, it's like this, staged moment that's very exciting and then like, oh no, like... so that was the one time where this kind of came up, and I was like, oh no, like, can you call it that? But I just think that, like, these little instances do not, like, queerbaiting make.
Yeah, and also we've kind of, changed our tune. Well, like, she has changed her tune, right. I should say.
Absolutely.
As the show goes on, you
forget
can see...
Comedy of Eros again, second season.
But also, her OTP remains Joxer and Gabrielle.
That's true. Look,
she pushed that ship hard.
We're not saying Chris Mannheim doesn't have problems. But yeah, I mean, this is, of course, like, whenever you talk about queerbaiting, you're talking about, like, what the creators intended. And the fact is that a show isn't made by one person. A show is made by so many people. For all we know, Katie McGrath is going into every scene with Kara just being like, I'm going to play this so gay.
No,
you know, she's doing all she can to put it in there.
She's one of those who was like, oh, I didn't realize this was so gay. And it's like, girl, have you seen yourself act with this woman?
So you guys, I keep running these quotes.
There's so many voices in a show that, you know, someone is going to say, like, they're totally straight, and someone's going to say, they're not fucking heterosexual, come on. Like, and it can be hard to, like, make a decision on that. And I think when you're confused about whether a thing is or isn't gay, like, look at the text itself. Like, as great as all these quotes are, and I think they're really illustrative of, like, what the relationships are between showrunner and audience, in the end, like, you have to look at the work. If the work is gay, you should be able to see that in it.
We also have the vantage point of, like, having all hindsight for the whole show.
That's true.
And everything that they've said since. Because I do feel like, and people who have been in the fandom are probably listening to us going like, that, like, during the run of the show, these conversations were happening and these arguments were happening, and these fights exist, and you can go find them. There's a whole page on line that we found that's just like a literal, like, a compendium of subtext information and quotes that then leads down to, like, an interview that we mentioned earlier, where, like, I don't know what happened with all of this. I think it had to do with the deliverer, which is, you know, a different topic. But it was part of Steve Sears going off and doing an interview with himself that you can find on Whoosh. Like, part of it is, like, there is a question that where he goes, have you ever been guilty of pushing the subtext for the sake of the audience? And then he says, yes, aside from the fact that I like it, I think it adds to the characters. And it doesn't diverge from my interpretations of who Xena and Gabrielle are. So just from, like, that, like, you can see that these conversations were happening. People are accusing them of, like, doing such and such.
Leading them on.
You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's like, so it's not, this is not new. We're not doing anything new. I just feel like, so it's important to also remember that fans were there and wanting, like, that it to be canon and real.
And we're afraid it wouldn't be.
Yeah. At the same time, we can go through everything that they've said for the last 20 years and just see how most everything, I won't put a 100% on everything, but, like, most everything leads to what I think is a good thing that Rob said in the oral history about R.J. Stewart. And he said that R.J. Stewart, the showrunner, was careful to make sure we never pandered because he never wanted to reduce the relationship or make it seem like the audience was being taken advantage of, which is the number one thing about queerbaiting, is that you're being taken advantage of.
Yeah, exploited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you ever see that in RJ or Rob or any of them, a sense of exploitation. Like, they cared about their audience and they cared about the characters.
Go team!
Yeah, I love this team. Like, it makes all the difference when people are really great and talented and, you know, progressive and have good ideas.
And don't have Twitter.
I mean... Certainly there were,
We mean 20 years ago. They do have Twitter now.
Yeah, they do have Twitter now, but I wouldn't want, it's some stuff is nice that you do, that you can say that you got to experience without Twitter. Oh no. What a site. What a website. It's free.
It's free.
That's for sure.
All right, so I guess that wraps it up.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Xena.
Oh boy.
We hope you agree with us. Xena is not queerbaiting.
It's queer, but it's not queerbaiting.
Queer, not queerbaiting.
Yeah. And it's awesome.
Yeah. Context is key. All right.
Cool.
So join us next week where we will begin season 5 with Fallen Angel.
Oh my God. Season 5.
That's a thing that exists.
Oh, yeah, it does. Also what exists are our website, XenaWarriorPodcast.com, where all the links exist to all the things. We are on Twitter at Xena Warrior Pod, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Xena Warrior Podcast. Patreon is patreon.com/Xena Warrior Podcast. Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe and listen and rate and leave reviews, which are honestly make our day and help people find the podcast. So, all right.
The power.
The passion.
The podcast.